I'd like to begin by inviting Bruce Jenks, who is Assistant Secretary General and Director for the Partnership Bureau in UNDP, to come and speak to us. Bruce, you're very welcome.
Thank you very much, Adam. It's great to be here. Let me take this opportunity to thank the Royal Society, to thank our partners Business Fights Poverty, to thank IBLF, WBCSD, and ODI. As you, I think, probably all know, it is the 2.6 billion of the poorest who suffer most from climate change, who are the most vulnerable and the least responsible. So right there, it's very clear that climate and development agendas are inextricably linked. They're linked from the point of view, as I just said, of the poorest, who are the most vulnerable. They're linked also from the point of view of donor agencies and givers, in a sense, if for no other reason that, at least according to one study, 40% of development expenditures today are climate risk sensitive. So if one gets into the development business and one is not climate sensitive, well, potentially throwing a significant portion of your resources literally down the river. It is linked from the point of view of the climate change agenda. Unless the climate change agenda is going to take the risk of being a highly divisive agenda, which is an alternative to a development perspective. And it's linked from the point of view of the huge resources which people are talking about, the hundreds of billions which will dwarf official development assistance. And therefore, the issue of that relationship will become a critical political issue, and as we all know, it already is. Now, the numbers are quite daunting. Again, as we all know, the International Energy Agency talks about, a trillion or more than a trillion just on a pathway, a current pathway, and adds another $500 billion if we're to get anywhere close to projected targets. And in those numbers, clearly the private sector and markets will play an absolutely huge role. But the private sector, while being absolutely fundamental, we all know can also be quite exclusive. An analysis of the CDM pipeline projects, other than the analysis that was done in the FT today, reveals the very small number of countries that benefit. And in fact, 5 countries, China, India, Brazil, Mexico, and South Korea, are expected to get about 80% of CDM credits by 2012. Africa could be bypassed completely in that process. And in addition to that, CDM investments could be characterized by high rates of return on the investment, but they don't necessarily have broad sustainable development benefits. It's against that background that we are pursuing this concept of developing inclusive markets as a way of making a critical contribution to this fundamental inherent link between the climate and development agendas, and especially development as it relates to the fate of the poorest. The private sector is fundamental and is the key engine of growth, as we all know, in these countries. And the poor, by and large, the great bulk of them live in the private sector. In countries with GDP per capita under $500, micro-enterprises and SMEs represent about 75% of all employment. And we all know the poor often pay more for worse products than richer people due to the market situation that they face. So I think it's clear that we need a climate change agenda that is also at the same time a development agenda. The alternative of a climate agenda which is in competition to a development agenda would be the most seriously divisive development, I think, that one could imagine over the next couple of decades. Under UNDP's GIM, Growing Inclusive Markets initiative launched in 2009, we really began to, with many colleagues and many partners, to look at how one could push forward with new, innovative, inclusive business models. And the idea was really to go beyond traditional corporate social responsibility. And corporate social responsibility is a very healthy and positive thing, and nothing that I'm saying should detract from that. But ultimately, if you can get businesses to look at their core business models and you can get them to make their profits and be successful with models that are more inclusive of the poor, both as consumers and producers, you're going to an altogether different level, potentially, of scalability and replicability as seen from a development perspective. So that study, which I think is outside and I think has been distributed, and I see the posters here, was based on very detailed empirical work, based on 50 case studies, and many colleagues and partners participated. And we've launched this as one of a group of colleagues. We have an advisory group which has a wonderful collection of people that have spent a lot of time thinking and working on this. And the basic conclusions identified a number of key constraints and key strategies to building inclusive markets. Constraints included limited market information, ineffective regulatory environments, inadequate physical infrastructure, missing skills, and restricted access to financial products and services. The key strategies to overcome these included, above all, adapting processes and products. And it's quite extraordinary, looking at some of those business cases, how relatively simple adjustments in process and product can entirely change the market situation for a company. Investing in removing constraints, leveraging the strengths of the poor, combining resources and capabilities. These were all some of the strategies that were developed in terms of dealing with those constraints. Now, the reason that we're here today, and I look forward very much to listening to the panelists, and that's where the action is, because the action is with the private sector and it's with people who are actually practicing this. We are now moving to the next phase, in a way, which is to look at this broad-based inclusive approach as it relates also to innovation relating to low-carbon routes and addressing climate change. And we're looking at a whole range of case studies that use exactly the same principles and exactly the same empirical kind of work and approach to trying to show what can be done through a vast array of companies and different types of situations for meeting head-on the climate change challenge. UNDP will be working with partners on this new generation of case studies and will showcase inclusive business models from various sectors and countries that address climate change adaptation and mitigation while including the poor in their new markets of goods and services as consumers, producers, and employees. And we hope, like we did last time, to be producing a significant report that will try and capture this and then to disseminate best practice. And one of the things that we spend a lot of time on is the dissemination in countries globally using our network. So we don't see this primarily as a piece of academic work. It's more a question of getting the empirical research, disseminating best practice, and really distributing that knowledge and sharing it around. And we're looking for all and every partner that's interested in joining in this effort. We'll be hearing some of the case studies in a couple of minutes. They cover areas moving from agriculture, forestry into energy and finance. In the energy sector alone, there is so much innovation relating to stoves, lights, refrigerators, solar energy, biofuel power plants, etc. I think that to summarize, what we're really looking at is three fundamental pillars or three fundamental areas where we think that we need to act and bring those together. The first is this need for business innovation. And I stress the business part of it because technology is obviously absolutely critical. But the part that deals with business process and practice is sometimes neglected in this. And that's, I think, the conclusion that we came out of from the first study. It may not sound quite as exciting, but it's quite critical. And we see that business innovation as a key to new low-carbon routes to development. Obviously, there are many factors that go into this, but a key. We see the need for inclusive approaches, approaches that do reach out and bring in the poor as producers and consumers, because we see that as a key to bringing those agendas together and developing a pro-poor development strategy around the climate agenda. And then finally, we see the need for replicable and sustainable practices and models. And I think, and I'll end with this, what's so important is that as we go down this discussion, as we see these huge numbers, as we see and focus on the really large emitters, and we focus on the really big polluters, and we focus on the large companies, we need to keep reminding ourselves that there are a couple of billion people out there that have a dramatic impact on these outcomes. They also are a couple of billion people that are surely worthy of as much attention as any other billion. And unless one develops an inclusive approach, and unless one looks at inclusive markets, and one joins that up to the carbon climate kind of agenda, then I think, as I said, that not only we will not achieve what we're trying to achieve, but we'll end up with a much more divided world on an issue that should really be bringing us together. Thank you.